So today we're going to talk about Decision Day 2022, and as I said before, I think this probably could be one of the craziest Decision Day we're going to see in a long time because it's been a while since we have seen a Decision Day where both conferences, the playoff places are still up for grabs, and both conferences, the home field advantage is still up for grabs too. I mean, there's going to be a lot of scoreboard watching. There's going to be a lot of teams that is a must-win situation, and there's also a lot of teams that there's going to be a big talking point if they do not make it to the playoffs after. For some of these teams that they've been in the playoff position for a very long time and then they dropped out on the final day, I mean, that's definitely not going to be a good feeling. But as it is on the title of this video, I'm going to take a look at the 5 key points that's going to happen in Decision Day 2022. And the first key points I've kind of mentioned before, and actually I kind of mentioned all those key points in the first 10 seconds of the video. And that, of course, both conference playoff races is still going right now. So, as I said, this is probably the first time in what has been a long time in MLS where we see both conferences still have the playoff race that is going to the final day. And, when you look at how this season has been with just pretty much majority year, there's a logjam between the playoff races in both conferences. You just had a feeling that this is going to come down to the final day. And indeed, that, of course, is the case. And what's even more staggering in terms of it is that there's basically 7 teams that is fighting for playoff position. If you look at both conferences, we have 4 teams in the West fighting for 2 spots. We have 3 teams in the East fighting for 2 spots. That's like a quarter of the league that is fighting for playoff position. I mean, I don't remember also the last time that I've seen a quarter of the team in the league that are still fighting for a playoff position. But that's where we are right now, and it's going to be very interesting to see how both of those conference races going to be. Now, that being said, talking about those playoff races in the conference, in the West, I think in the West, it's basically just going to be a play-in tournament for the playoffs. Now, if you don't know, when you look at the final day of those playoff races and those matches, what is very, very interesting, and I'm not sure if this is maybe a coincidence or maybe the fact that this is basically set up to be the craziest Decision Day 2022, or maybe those MLS scheduler had this kind of in mind in the future, or if you even want to go conspiracy theorists, all of a sudden you can say that they might have jumped into a time machine and then jump back into when they make the schedule that they knew that this was going to how it turned out in the Western Conference race. And that, of course, it's a playing tournament in the Western Conference. Now, we did have the play-in tournament back in the COVID-shortened year in the Eastern Conference, but I feel like this year it's kind of an unofficial play-in tournament in the Western Conference, because what's very interesting about the Western Conference race is that all 4 of those teams are basically playing against each other. So what that means is that you have Minnesota United playing against the Vancouver Whitecaps, and then the Portland Timbers playing against Real Salt Lake, and that's all the team that is fighting for those 2 spots, and pretty much all those teams still control their playoff destiny, because if they can get a win out of all those 4 teams, or out of all those 14 that gets the win, then they make it to the playoffs. Now, if they lose, then they're going to be eliminated from the playoff picture. So again, it's kind of like a play-in tournament. I mean, if you in a play-in tournament, you need to win, of course, to get into the next round. Now, the difference between the play-in tournament that we have in the Eastern Conference a couple of years ago is the fact that if it ends in a draw, then it gets a little bit interesting to see how it is. And I'll talk a lot about the scenarios of what happened if it does end up in a draw in one, or if both of those games. But for now, I just want to say that this is kind of like a play-in tournament, and it's going to be fascinating to see how it's going to turn out in the Western Conference race. Now, in the Eastern Conference, it's basically 3 teams battling for 2 spots. But what's interesting about the East is that, well, it's not a play-in tournament in the Eastern Conference conference to decide the playoff race. It kind of is with the way that you actually have a 7v8 kind of battle in decision day, and I don't remember the last time we have had a decision day kind of match where literally one team is just above the red line and one team is below the red line. Like I think the closest I can think of was probably in 2019 when the Quakes play against the Portland Timbers, and how the Quakes were an 8 seed and that the Timbers were 6 seeds, and that winner of that one will basically make it to the playoffs. But this is even more fascinating with the way that it's a 7v8 kind of matchup, and that I think the other team that is still in the playoff battle is Orlando City, and I think they of course play, or actually no, they're not Orlando City. I'm sorry. I'm talking about FC Cincinnati, who's in the 6th seed, and I think they're playing against DC United on the final day. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how that is gonna go. And again, there's gonna be those scenarios where if you have a 7v8 kind of matchup, if it ends in a draw, I believe the team that is in the 7th seed would make it to the playoffs. I need to of course look back at it, and again I'll talk a lot about that scenario when we do the preview for these decision day game. But it's kind of interesting that there's going to be 3 teams that's battling for 2 spots, but also we have a 7v8 kind of matchup, and we have a matchup between 2 teams that is one being above the red line and one being below the red line. Now at number 4, home field advantage still up for grabs. So when you look at both conferences, and this is the thing that I don't think I mentioned a lot. Well, I mentioned this a lot in the Western Conference, where I mentioned how when you look at that fourth spot, there literally is still 3 teams that is battling for those fourth spot, and that the 4th spot is very important because that's the last spot where you can at least have one home game in the opening round of the playoffs. But what's interesting, that thing I think not many people know, and I haven't talked about a lot, is that that's kind of the same case in the Eastern Conference too. Now, in the East, it's not as crazy as in the West, where you have like 4 teams battling for that 4th position. But in the East, you still have Inter Miami, who I know yesterday they're definitely still celebrating them clinching for their playoff position, but they have now got all the way up to 5th place, and they actually still have a shot in terms of getting 4th position. Like, I know if you talk to every Inter Miami fans, they'll be happy if they can make it to the playoffs, but I don't think many people them would know that they could be even more ecstatic if they can actually get that 4th position, because the Red Bulls have been struggling in these last couple of games, and it's getting to a point where combination with the Red Bulls kind of struggling and Inter Miami just being red hot down the stretch, they can actually get that 4th position. Like, all Inter Miami need to do is to get a win against Montreal and hope that the Red Bulls lost that game and they jump the Red Bulls for that 4th position. Now, either way, both of these teams most likely is going to be playing against each other in the playoffs, though, that 3rd position is still not set, and that the Red Bulls technically they can still pass their rival, and that that can be a possibility. But again, it's very fascinating to see that home field advantage is still kind of up for grabs for both conference too. And as much as I talk about the Western Conference being up for grabs, it's the same case for the Eastern Conference too. Now, number 5, the key points. I have to mention the tiebreaker. I think so for many people that are probably just getting into MLS, or they're probably watching this video for the very first time and wondering how does the tiebreaker works in decision day. Well, the tiebreaker is basically the regular tiebreaker that MLS basically use. And what's interesting about the tiebreaker that MLS uses is that they use wins as the first tiebreaker. Now, normally we've seen in other European league where they use like tiebreaker as the goal difference, or they might use tiebreakers on like a head-to-head kind of battle, and they don't consider wins until maybe like the 3rd tiebreaker. That's not the case in MLS. In MLS, wins is definitely the first tiebreaker, and I can understand why exactly that is the first tiebreaker, because I know MLS is trying to encourage these teams to always win games, and this is why I talked about before, where not only the fact that drawing games might not be beneficial to you in terms of rising up the tables, because if you keep drawing games, especially at home, and keep dropping points, you're most likely going to fall behind teams that is either above you that is pulling away because they're getting wins, or teams behind you that is catching you because they're also getting free points. But one of the thing that is a huge disadvantage in terms of draws is the fact that you basically now might not have the tiebreaker advantage because you're not getting enough wins. And we're seeing this right now when you look at both conferences, where some teams, even though they have lost fewer games to those teams that have more or have lost fewer games, they don't have the tiebreaker because they've drawn so many games. And one of the big example of it has to be the Columbus Crew, where again, I think Columbus this season they've only lost like 7 games, and I know they have lost I think only 2 games in the past couple of months. But here's the problem: they've gone a lot of draws, and they're getting a lot of draws at a point where they are actually, like, if this season would have gone a little bit longer, they probably could have matched Nashville or even past Nashville record last season in terms of draws, because I think they've drawn like 16 times after that 2-2 draw that they had against Charlotte FC. And again, those draws, it's going to hurt your tiebreaker chances because, you know, Columbus only have 10 wins and that the teams around them have already got like 12 or 13 wins. So that's why you know, it's so important in MLS, where, you know, wins really matters. Like, it not only matters in terms of you keeping track of teams around you, but also the fact that you want to have that tiebreaker. And hence, this is also why I've seen before where maybe some teams might actually decide to go for it instead of maybe just kind of being a little bit pragmatic or being a little bit conservative, that, you know what, we should of course just take a draw, and that will help our cause. Well, it will help your cause in terms of you're playing on the road, because I've said before, you know, when you get road points, it's definitely a good thing, but it's not going to help your cases in terms of the tiebreakers. So yeah, you know, that's an important thing to figure out. And I think the second tiebreaker would be goal difference, and then the third tiebreaker I believe will be in terms of head record. But either way, you know, it's very important that wins is the first tiebreaker, and hence that's why you see some teams might actually have more losses than the other team, and you're thinking, well, why they're above the red line when that team has fewer losses? Well, it's because they have more wins, and if you have more wins compared to the other team, that's kind of how MLS view it as a reason why you deserve to make it to the playoffs. Now, obviously, there's going to be that argument, well, they lost more games, and that could be another interesting argument to make. But for now, that's how MLS view it. They encourage teams to win games, and that if you of course win games instead of always drawing games, you can definitely help your cases in terms of your tiebreaker. But there you have it. That is pretty much it, looking at the 5 key points that is happening in Decision Day 2022. And again, this is relatively a vague kind of video, talk about all the things that is up for grabs. I'll have a little bit more detail as we get into the preview of the Eastern Conference matches on Decision Day and the Western Conference matches on Decision Day 2. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of these video, and let me know in the comments below what other key points you're looking forward to of what could be the craziest Decision Day we ever had in league history. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys see a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.